everyone. Welcome to another Underrated Film Saturday. I apologize this video is being unfortunately uploaded late. Been having some issues as far as the audio is concerned, as well as YouTube being fairly slow as far as when it wants to upload things. So there's unfortunately, as a result, had to be a delay. But we should be hopefully caught up by the end of today. So without further ado, let me address what I wanted to talk about for this Underrated Film Saturday, which is the film Coraline. This is in particular a children's film. And in case any of you don't know, I am 80s chick minion Michelle, returning from my encounter on this channel last year. So basically, Coraline is a stop-motion animated film. And it's not produced by the likes of Tim Burton and Danny Elfman, but rather of a smaller, I guess you could say, production company that's not really tied with those names. It's not something by Disney or DreamWorks. So it's one of the reasons why I think it generally got overlooked was the fact that it didn't really have this big name behind it, which is usually what ends up happening with a lot of these children's films nowadays. It's either a DreamWorks production or a Disney production, and if it doesn't have those two labels, it's really difficult to compete. But basically, the story follows a girl in particular. They don't really state the age, but I'm assuming sort of preteen to teenage girl. None other than named Coraline, who doesn't in particular get along with her parents. This is really the sort of emphasis that the film tries to put on, is the fact that she feels very unsatisfied with her life because of the lack of bonding she's sort of receiving from her parents. And what ends up resulting is that she ends up finding another world in which she sort of has the perfect dad and the perfect mom, and sort of the perfect setup for her life, in which she can sort of feel like she's having fun and, you know, feel sort of a part of the whole environment that she's in, unlike the environment that her real parents inhabit. But unfortunately, the other mother that she comes across, who's sort of supposed to replace her mom within this alternate world, is a lot more sinister than initially expected. And so this is where the film takes a very bizarre and dark and really strange turn as a result of her sort of continuing to visit this world. And the film does a really good job of trying to keep that very strange tone at the forefront. The characters overall are fairly likable, although I would say I felt that this film in particular took a lot of inspiration from various other films. If you've seen, for example, Spirited Away, Alice in Wonderland, you know, those kinds of stories really, I think, were what drew influence for this particular work. But the way in which it executes it is rather unique and interesting, because, again, it has this whole plot setup of finding this alternative world / universe, and, you know, kind of addresses a concept that I think a lot of children in particular are familiar with, which is, you know, sort of be careful what you wish for, you know, not everything's the way it ultimately seems. And that's really ultimately all, though, I can reveal as far as the plot is concerned without really giving too much away. But although I felt at certain times it was a little bit too strange for me as far as stories like this go, in particular ones that are trying to be a little bit more dark and grim, it's still really interesting, and I think definitely worthy of looking into if you're sort of into this kind of more darker kinds of children's films. Um, it leaves itself off on a satisfying note, although I think there's certain elements within the plot that are not thoroughly explained as far as the backstory of in which this sort of world was created. Um, so it still leaves things open to mystery, which might have been the intention behind the film, but I think there could have been some hints of it better explaining things. But overall, as far as an attempt at an animated film that is not a Disney or DreamWorks production, I think this one in particular really does stand out and does deserve this kind of recognition. And it is very scary at points, and it does try to bring out sort of the elements that you see within a lot of these other darker children's films. And you sort of see the horror behind the circumstances in which Coraline finds herself in. Um, but overall, I think that the parents, although they're given a certain amount of dimension, I don't think they're entirely focused on. I think largely this film tries to do it through Coraline's point of view, which I think, has its advantages and disadvantages. But overall, it is rather interesting, and I think it's definitely one that is worthy of paying attention to if you're sort of interested in those kinds of films. But I think that's really ultimately all I can say about it without really giving too much away. And the animation overall, as far as stop motion is concerned, is also really interesting and unique. And it's sometimes a little bit too strange for me, but again, I think everybody has their own certain taste when it comes to these kinds of films. And so if you like what you see as far as the images are concerned, then you'll find yourself intrigued. Although I would say it's probably not necessarily one of my particular underrated favorites as far as children's films go, in particular ones that are dark and try to bring out the things that we associate with oftentimes during Halloween. It's still enjoyable nonetheless. But I think that's really all I can say when it comes to this film without really giving too much away. But if there are any questions, comments, concerns, be more than happy to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Or hopefully next year if they bring me back. But I wish the next minion luck. Goodbye.